but you got to be on your toes because we promote that kids coming in. If you're the best guy, you're going to play. And I think kids really responded to that. When they came in, they knew they could, if they fought, they could earn a spot. But then also they knew that if they earned that spot, they had to keep fighting because it could be taken away.
Well, like that part of our program, I was going to say when we were seniors at Grandview, that was one of the biggest things that happened with our football program was that we put the junior Michael Burton got made the starting quarterback, and I think that was looking back, I think that was the better move to do. I mean, I don't know if the senior would have done better or not, but I think it's really important to say that everybody has a chance to play. Like if you're the best, you can makes them want to try even more.
Yeah.
More than they would maybe if they didn't feel like they had a shot at starting. So I think that's really important that everybody feels like that because it sure worked out when we were seniors in high school.
Yeah, it definitely gives them a little self-worth, and they know that if hey, if I can come in and fight, I'll have an opportunity.
Yeah, and sometimes that relationship, as you kind of go from position coach to coordinator to head coach, you still want relationships with your players, but it becomes a little different.
Right.
So how was that transition, over your career? Like you said, started as position coach, head freshman coach, and then, became a coordinator at St. Pius and then head coach. How did you kind of change or mold your relationship with your players based on where you were?
Well, it was one of those things. I always tried to continue to interact with them. But the main thing was, like I said earlier about my assistants, I always wanted them, if I hired somebody, one of the main things that I did was to try and make the kids believe that guy, if he's going to be the running back coach, he needs to be the expert at running back coaches. And so I would always tell our kids, hey, if they would come, I need a couple more reps at running back. Well, you need to talk to Coach so-and-so. Because he's the expert at running backs. So that's your guy. And I always thought that was to have those kids see them as that guy, and then they would kind of look up to me a little differently. Mm-hmm. And so that way, that kind of insulated me a little bit from having to make too many of those calls. But I always wanted to keep my hands in, but I always wanted those assistants to develop those relationships first, and then I could sometimes be the strokes guy. I could always be the nice guy, but and that would always help me out a little bit. So, but I think it really worked out for the assistant coaches to make them feel like they really had a stake in it, and also let the kids know that it's kind of a hierarchy. You need to go through this guy, and then I'll be every once in a while I can be the friend.
Yeah, and that's a good lesson for the kids to learn, because in the real world, you don't just go to the CEO and say, hey, I want to do this.
Absolutely.
There's a few guys you got to talk to first.
That's right.
So that's always, I've always said that football's going to teach you way more life lessons,
right.
Beyond the X's and O's.
Oh God, yes. Oh yeah, it's being at a private school, it's always funny. That's what we always talk about. That when kids are, they just figure, they can pray and it'll be granted and something like that. And we say, well, you gotta go to a few steps before you get to the big guy. So you got to talk to Mary and a few others before you get to the big man.
Yeah, you got to work through, the hierarchy. And, I like that, you put it back on your assistants and say, well, have you talked to your coach? Because
right.
as an assistant coach, I've never been the head guy, but I've worked for some guys that, a kid maybe come to them and then they say, hey, why ain't this kid getting more reps, or
right.
What are you doing? And it's like, well, don't you trust me that I'm going to put, the guy that's best
guy,
for our program
right.
out there?
I'm going to do the best for everybody.
I'm trying to win too. So, just because if this kid's, terrible, I'm not going to.
Yeah, I'm not going to last too long if I'm playing, my favorites. Just because he's a good kid. And we all have those, we all have those great kids, but you got to be fair. You got to be honest that, that hey, just because you're that, we sit and talk at lunch doesn't mean you're going to get to start on Friday night. So
yeah, definitely. You know, like you said, I mean, especially at the higher levels you go,
Yeah.
you know, the more that relationship has to be separated because of, you know, I mean, at our high school level, you know, we're fortunate most of the time where, you know, wins and losses aren't just categorized in. There's so much more
Yes.
to it. You know, but obviously the higher levels you go, the more that's more important. And it's like, hey, these guys got to eat. So
Oh, yeah.
they're going to play those kids that
Yeah.
can do that. So in the article that was in the Star last week, you know, they did mention a few players. Luke Richardson, who played for you in the 90s, went on. He became an NFL Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year in 2012. What are some fond memories you have of Luke when he was in school?
Oh God, Luke. Well, Luke was a different character. I was the head wrestling coach as well, and one thing that people probably don't know, that there was a moment there where at St. Pius I was the head coach of 3 sports for a few years. I was the head football coach, the head wrestling coach, and the head track coach. So and Luke,
did you sleep?
No, and when I did, it was at St. Pius. So I was there. I think I took over as the head football coach, and I was the head wrestling coach from day one when I got to Pius. And then I took over, and then I was also the head track coach. So I was assistant football, head wrestling, and head track. And so then I took over football. So for that 2 years there, I was the head coach of all 3.
Wow.
And I coached boys and girls track by myself, and I was the wrestling coach by myself. And so it was one of those deals where you know, you got to know all the kids really well. So Luke was one of those guys that he just did everything. He came in, he played football, he wrestled, and ran track, and was good at all 3 of them. Probably could have went to a Division II school and played right away. Had a lot of offers, but he was one of those kids that just wanted to be a part of the Division I program. He ended up going to Kansas, and while he was there, he just really got into the strength and conditioning part of it, and he was an assistant strength coach there, and then I think he went out to Wyoming, and then he worked at that Athletes Performance, that place down in Arizona that got guys ready for the combine. He did that, and then it worked out that he got hired when Jacksonville first got to get their program. He was the first strength coach that they had for Del Rio.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then when Peyton went to the Broncos, he went there with him, and then he stayed there until Peyton quit, and then he went to the Texans, and now his son's he's a sophomore quarterback, and they're down in Nashville at a prep school called at an academy called Lipscomb Academy.
Oh, Trent
Trent
Dilfer.
Dilfer's the coach, yeah. And so that's what he came up here to visit me. And, and his son was looking at going to Pius. You know, it was kind of cool. They were moving from Houston, and he went, and then they decided on Lipscomb Academy, and Luke called me up and said, "Coach, I'm sorry." I said that probably is not a bad move, your quarterback son getting coached by Trent Dilfer rather than Rick Byers. So I said, I think he's probably going to learn a couple more things. So Luke was just one of those guys that he was just a go-getter. He's just a go-getter, and he wanted to get in that arena right away.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's awesome. The lifelong relationship piece. You know, again, just kind of speaks to you and the time you put in to those guys when they're in high school.
Yeah,
you know, the fact that he came back, you know, all these years later, and he's like, "Hey, I'm thinking about moving, and you know, let's talk about maybe my son playing for you."
Right, and it was cool. You know, he brought his whole family down, and they looked around Pius, and it was an exciting time because you know he's a pretty darn good quarterback.
Yeah,
so, and we were like going, "Oh, great! Finally, we get a move in." Usually, I get the move-ins I get are guys on the chess team or something like that. So
yeah,
it was kind of exciting, but I was very excited for them when the opportunity came, and I think they made it to the semifinal down there in Nashville this year, and Dilfer did a great job, and that place, I got to get down there and look at it because it looks pretty exciting.
Yeah, Coach Hoover that I work for at Shawnee Mission East is good friends with Trent Dilfer because the Elite 11 stuff. And
right.
So that when you said the name, that's why it was so fresh in my memory. That's where he's at because Coach Hoover's talking about it. I tried to, I went to the Nashville Chiefs game with this guy and some other friends, and I tried to get Coach Hoover to kind of set me up so I could go check out the school, but they were still playing.
Right.
So I was like, let's just leave him alone because I know how it is when you're in
when
that
you're
grind.
Still in the mix. Yeah.
I think it was the week after might have been I think the week heading into their quarterfinals.
Right.
So I was like, let's just
not bother them.
Yeah.
It seems to work out, and Luke's boy had a heck of a career, and Luther had a heck of a year. So things are looking up, and and you got a guy like Trent leading the way. You can't go wrong. So.
Yeah. Another guy was current Drake assistant Willie Cashmore. Said he graduated in 2000. He's the current Oklahoma State special teams coordinator.
Well, we have the two brothers. We have Patrick and Willie.
Okay.
Willie's at Drake. Patrick just took a job. He left Oklahoma State, and he was at when. Who was our guy, the running back from Kansas City that got into trouble? The Toledo. Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt. Yeah.
He was the running backs coach at Toledo when Kareem was at Toledo.
Okay.
And then he took a job at Oklahoma State and became the special teams coordinator. And Pittsburgh State just hired the offensive coordinator from Toledo to be the head coach, and he had Patrick come down. So now he's at Pitt State. So which is cool. And he was one of those guys, probably one of the best. He was a Fontana Award winner and probably one of the better players that ever come out of this area. He just he was one of those guys that never passed the eye test. He was 5'10", 215, kind of short, but could play some football. I think he's still number 6 in Missouri and total yards rushed in high school. So he's a pretty good player. And his brother Willie was our guy in 2002, and he's pretty much the same guy. He's more 6 foot and 220. Just a really good running back, and he's played at Drake and he's having a great career there now as a tight ends coach and special teams guy.
Any good Mike Gundy stories from Patrick?
Well, he loves him. He talks about him all the time, he's the greatest guy. And he said, the only thing, you just don't touch the mullet, I guess.
Did you hear what T-Bone did?
No.
He willed him like a haircut to some sports clips or something, and to go get in his will. That was the thing he left Mike.
But he loves him. He said Coach Gundy's all about family. He said he never lets those guys work their butts off, and he makes them work, and then when it's time to go home, he makes them go home. And so that was one thing he really loved about him. So.
Yeah. That's 3 guys that, like I said, I saw the excerpt from the Kansas City Star, and that they had mentioned over, probably thousands of guys that have came through your program. Are there any other, names that just kind of jump out and guys that have played for you, maybe that haven't gone on and had successful playing or coaching careers in college, but have come back and have turned into great men?
Oh, yeah. You know what? There's so many. And that's one of the things I always say when I talk to young guys coming in. We haven't had a ton of kids that played Division I. I think we've had 3 in my time. Mm-hmm. But we've had a ton of guys who played Division II, NAIA, Division III. And I always tell them, I say, I've had twice as many doctors and lawyers as I've had college football players. A kid like Junior Silverio, who was a all-state football player and all-state wrestler, that's come back, and now he's helping Hispanic kids and over in North Kansas City District, and Ryan Vapp, who's a big guy out at attorney out in Columbia, and Kevin O'Rourke Jr. He went to Notre Dame, didn't play football, but he's a doctor down here in Kansas City. So with just tons of kids, that just really do well, and a lot of guys who are teachers and coaches, and just guys that are just making their way. one of the great things about where we're located, we're right by Cerner, and like I think that should be St. Pius North because they hire so many of our kids over there, to go work, and those young guys, they have them traveling around, and so it's just a good spot, and the kids love working there, and they seek out our kids. So